Well, it's a pleasure to have in the studio Dr. Stuart Bramhall. Greetings. And Kath, Lauderdale. And I'll explain the connection very, very soon. Can I just say belatedly, do you mind if I call you Stuart?
No, I prefer to be called that.
Can I just say belated congratulations, what you've done and achieved in your leadership for about 18 years now in Taranaki. I've been aware of you, even though we haven't engaged, and I've admired what you've had to say about climate change and about justice and equity. And I go to Pukeariki Library often, and you're learning Māori, and you're doing really, really well. And I just think you're a wonderful person. So can I just say, on behalf of the good folk of Taranaki, thank you for your contribution.
Well, you're making me blush.
Well, that's all right. You deserve it. You deserve it. And Kath, it must be a privilege to be flanked by Stuart.
Absolutely. Stuart's been a wonderful supporter and mentor and taught me so much over the last few years.
For the benefit of our viewers that may not be aware of your background and CV, in the last election in 2007, you stood for the Green Party as a candidate in New Plymouth, and you did very well. Stuart, you came fourth. You got 5.26%, 2,070 votes, not far behind high-profile Murray Chong with New Zealand First. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And I watched you when you campaigned. I thought you were succinct and cerebral and objective. And I got the impression that you were respected. How did you find campaigning in the last election?
Well, I enjoyed it because I felt I had a platform for what I had to say.
Yes.
And that's the main reason I stood, is that I got to go to all these public meetings and lay out what I believed in. Yeah. I didn't expect to be sent to Parliament.
Well, I'll tell you what, if everyone did as well as you, 5.26%, that means the Greens would be in government, and they are in government, so well done. Hey, a little bit about you. I read here, psychiatrist, and the media says voluntary social and environmental work. So tell me about your professional background. We're going back to America here, the University of Wisconsin, and Milwaukee. Is that where Happy Days is set?
Oh, yeah, it is.
So tell me about your professional background, Stuart.
Well, I did 2 years at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Medical School, and then I transferred to Mount Sinai Medical School, so that's where I got my degree. Mm-hmm. And then I did 3 years of postgraduate training in psychiatry at the University of Utah. And I was in private practice for 5 years in Chico, California, and in Seattle for 20 years.
Well, you've done well academically and professionally. You're also an author. I read here, Amazon Books, the novel 2011, The Battle for Tomorrow, a fable. What's all that about? Well, in less than 100 words.
It's a young adult novel about a young girl who becomes politicized. Mm-hmm. Basically, her background is that she cares for her disabled mother, and she has to have an abortion, and that's kind of a crisis in her life, and that kind of politicizes her, and she goes to Washington, D.C., and participates in a protest, and because she's only 16, they lock her up in juvenile hall for participating in a protest where they blocked the freeway.
Yeah, how fascinating. Mm. Now, is it true that you may have come to New Zealand because you were very disillusioned and not a great fan of George W. Bush and what was happening, with the foreign policy of
absolutely.
America?
Yeah, absolutely. I could not support the wars in Afghanistan or Iraq or the keeping of prisoners and torturing them at Guantanamo or anywhere else. And as long as I stayed in the United States, it didn't matter how much I marched. Wow. I was still supporting that regime with my taxes.
Well, we're pleased you came here.
Well, I'm really pleased too. I really like it here.
So you must have expedited things and become a New Zealand citizen to stand for the Green Party.
Well, kind of.
Because you have to be a citizen of New Zealand to stand for Parliament.
That's right. Yeah, I became a citizen in 2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you stood for the Green Party.
That's right.
So you're really into equity and inclusion and all these core values, and we know that you're a custodian of the environment.
That's right.
All right, I have to ask the obvious question. Given that the Democrats for Social Credit in the last election got 8 votes and Kath here is the candidate for social credit, and they've rebranded with the old name, and I'm sure Kath is going to do a lot better. Why would you lend your mana and your brand to, for want of a better word, endorse Kath? And what is it about social credit that would result in you coming here to show a little bit of solidarity for Kath?
Well, I believe that we need to make a lot of changes in a hurry in order to prevent catastrophic climate change. And I don't believe that we can pay for them under our current economic system. I think there needs to be a major change in the way money is created if we're going to be able to pay.
So do you believe social credit has a way forward that makes sense that you could support?
Yeah, absolutely. I also, besides belonging to the Social Credit Party, I also belong to Positive Money New Zealand, and we're basically into education and outreach into informing people how our monetary system actually works.
Yeah.
And we work very closely with social credit.
Okay.
We have actually a member of our steering committee that's going to stand in Auckland as a social credit candidate.
I see you as a cerebral academic, almost an objective type person. In terms of fiscal policy, the misapprehension is that they just print the money. It's got something to do with the Reserve Bank, and they're in la-la land of dreaming. Can you explain as succinctly as possible, what is it about social credit and their fiscal policy that you're enamored with or you agree with?
Well, okay, right now the government is doing something called quantitative easing. I don't know if you know what that means.
It's sort of like just printing money, isn't it?
Well, they print money out of thin air.
Yes.
And they use it to buy treasury bonds from banks.
Yes.
So all the money ends up with banks that we create. So here we are, the Reserve Bank creating all of this money.
Yeah.
We're using it to buy back treasury bonds, and instead of the money going into the economy, it goes to banks.
Yes.
And what they tried that in the United States, they tried that in the UK, they tried that in the European Union after the last global economic crash. The theory was that the banks would suddenly get very generous and start giving loans to business.
Yes.
And they didn't. They used that money to buy back their shares, to push up the share price, to increase the salary of their CEOs, and to basically engage in a lot of derivative speculation. And so none of that money ended up in the economy.
All right, so you're disillusioned with that. So what are social credit advocating that you think would work?
Okay, so if social credit would leave the banks out of it.
Yes.
They would have the Reserve Bank create the money and spend it directly into the economy to promote various infrastructure programs and to support basic services that are very underfunded right now.
Wow, this is from me quite revelatory, because with you being such a noted environmentalist and such a eloquent spokesperson for the Green Party to come out and say this, maybe it would cause a surprise. So despite all their very good credentials in regard to the environment, do you think the Green Party is still part of the status quo?
They're definitely part of the status quo.
When it comes to the
Absolutely.
fiscal policy.
Yeah, James Shaw specifically came out last week he said, well, maybe we could try to issue a tiny bit of money into the economy, but it was very risky, and he said it was untested.
So the economic fallout of COVID-19 maybe has given you more impetus to say what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Because I am surprised you're here. I mean, Kath's a lovely person, but you are essentially kind of endorsing her and giving her credibility. So, Kath, this must be very humbling and heartening for you to have Dr. Stuart Bramhall say this.
It really
with
is.
you sitting beside her.
Yeah, it's just wonderful, and it's very, very brave of Stuart to do, because I mean, people get knocked off for saying for saying these things. You know, various presidents have challenging the banking monopolies and private. So it's important we have support, and I really appreciate that she.
Stuart, are you expecting a bit of? I mean, I'm sure they think highly of you with Araha. Are you expecting a bit of pushback from the Green Party? Coming out and
really.
Kind of supporting the fiscal policy of social credit?
Not really. Kath and I worked very closely together to try to get the Green Party caucus to adopt what we're proposing. Yes. And we got a majority of the membership to approve it, and the policy committee to approve it, and caucus has refused to release the policy. Right. So, and that's in violation of all the principles of the Green Party.
Yeah. So, Stuart, in your opinion, does Kath have the intellectual, economic wherewithal to be a competent MP for New Plymouth if people really believed in her and voted for her, in your opinion?
I don't think that her wherewithal is limited to economics.
All right.
Okay, she's very well read. She follows the media extremely closely, a lot better than what I do. And so she's very, very much aware of political issues happening here.
You sharing those comments.
Yeah, both here and internationally. I mean, she's very, very well versed in what's going on, and has some very practical ideas of what the kind of policies we need to pursue.
Stuart, just as an aside, because you're interested, and we'll do more interviews with you. I understand you've got quite a presence in America, and you engage in debate and so forth. Very, very briefly, what do you make of the Black Lives Matter and what's happening in America?
Well, it's hard to say because there are a lot of anomalies in the video that was released of the policeman putting his knee on this.
Not so much that incident, but the phenomenon, the protest, the movement,
right?
I
think
of abominating racism and toppling statues, and the whole fact that we're just reviewing everything. That's probably what I'm getting
right. I think that my concern is that that movement is infiltrated. Just as most social movements are infiltrated in the United States by the U.S. intelligence. But it seems to me that it's got away from them. They've lost control of it. And what's happened now is there's a genuine mass uprising occurring. And it's both black and, unemployed white young people that are engaging in these protests.
Can I just say how heartening and inspiring it is for me as an expatriate Australian who probably should be learning Māori like you, to see you learning about the Māori culture, tangata whenua, and learning the beautiful language. And I just think that's inspiring, because I read here, nothing sacred, on Wikipedia, that you were born in 1947.
Yes.
Are you enjoying learning te reo and Māori?
Yeah, I am. My progress depends on how well I sleep at night. But on nights I sleep well. I'm making really good progress.
Well, it's because you were learning Māori the other day and speaking aloud that I got to formally meet you, and I apologise for not interviewing you 3 years ago. Hey, let's just wrap it up, because you and I, Stuart, will engage again. Stuart, why social credit? Why should people consider social credit? Because here's the thing, it's MMP, but we have this attitude, I don't want to waste my vote on a party that 3 years ago got a miserable 8 votes. Why should people gamble on a little party like social credit?
Well, my impression is that they're doing far better in marketing than they have in the past. That they've done very little in the way of marketing. They have bought, at least 4 rounds of full page ads all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah, and because of that, there's a lot of good news coverage. Chris Leach is in the paper at least once a week.
Yes.
And there's also been
Good
really
marketing now. Yes, continue.
And really there's really excellent coverage about kind of a disagreement between Adrian Orr, who is the governor of the Reserve Bank, and Grant Robertson. Yep. Because what Adrian Orr says, if these banks keep the money, and they don't release it to make loans to businesses, he says he's all in favor, of issuing the money directly into the economy. And it's like he's holding that as a threat over, and this is really the first time these issues have gotten good coverage.
So with the marketing and that,
yeah,
this is further reasons why people could consider voting for social credit.
Right, absolutely.
And because Hokanui wants to give everyone a fair go, and I respect you, I think it's perfectly appropriate that you and I are having this conversation, because as you know, it's MMP, but quite often when it comes to media coverage, it's almost presidential, isn't it?
Yes.
It's almost like pretty much national versus Labor.
Right.
Well, we don't want to go down austerity at all. I don't think New Zealand can afford that at all.
All right. Well, I just want to say it's lovely having both of you in the studio.
Thank you, Brian.
Stuart, we need to engage again, and something tells me that you've got plenty of energy, and there's plenty more interviews to have. So, wishing you and all the aspirants, I've got tremendous admiration for anyone that puts their reputation and their name on the block in your mana. I think it's a very wonderful thing, and I think democracy is served. So, thank you for coming in, Stuart, and good to catch up with you, Kath.
Thanks, Brian.
My pleasure.